Welcome to the Chicago Money Show. I'm Bridget Sullivan Mermel. Today, we're not going to talk about numbers. We're going to talk about the emotion and the spirit behind the money choices that you make. We're going to try to help you get from just getting by to getting everything you want. My guest is Barbara Huson. She's written 7 bestsellers, including Overcoming Underearning, Rewire for Wealth, and Prince Charming Isn't Coming. She's a leading expert on helping people achieve through money. When I feel stuck, I consult one of her books to figure out how to stop blaming myself and how to start taking action. I'm thrilled she's joining us today. Welcome, Barbara.
Hey, Bridget. Thanks for having me.
It's so great to see you. Okay, so if you can summarize in a sentence or two how different people perceive money, what would you say?
You know, people perceive money usually based on how they grew up and how they were conditioned. So some people perceive money as safety and security. Some people perceive money as a chance to spend and indulge. Some people see money as scarcity. There's a whole variety, but in 2 sentences, that's the best I can do.
Okay, great. And I've seen that it's either, a lot of times you either mimic your parents or you go the opposite. Like there seems to be those 2 paths until you start being more conscious about it. So you're a financial therapist and a wealth coach. So why don't you tell me more about the difference between that and like what you do in both of those roles?
So I was trained as a therapist, but I didn't want to be a therapist. I started out as a career counselor for women, and then I went through my own financial crisis, and healing from that and the devastation it caused me. I realized this is what I got through it miraculously, and there wasn't a lot of help out there for me at the time. This was 30 years ago, 40 years ago. I thought, this is what I want to do. I want to help women, and I work exclusively with women. I want to help women become empowered around money. And so that's what I do. And because I was trained as a therapist, I certainly, I use therapeutic techniques. So I call myself a financial therapist, but I'm also a wealth coach. And what I do is, what I want to help women do is not just get out of debt or stick to a budget. Those are important. But I want to take them all the way. Mm-hmm. I want to take them to be wealthy, to have more than enough.
Mm-hmm. So it's so interesting. So what is your background? So we were talking before about how you can go one of 2 directions, you know, like your parents or not like your parents. How did that set up for you?
I grew up in a wealthy family. My father was the R of H&R Block, but the only advice he ever gave me about money was don't worry, which I thought was great. I didn't understand money. I just wanted to spend it. And of course, the don't worry under that was the unspoken assumption there'll always be a man to take care of you, which I loved even better. And sure enough, right out of college, I married a man who became a stockbroker. So he was perfect, right? But I found out very early in my marriage. So I did not want to take responsibility. I did not. So I guess I turned out like my mother, the opposite of my father. And so I let him manage the money because that's how intimidated I was and terrified of anything financial. And after our divorce, I decided money's not my thing. I don't want to deal with money. Well, I have this theory that if you don't deal with your money will deal with you. And in the next year, I got tax bills for over $1 million, for $1,800,000 and something. I did not have $1 million, not anywhere close to it. My ex had left the country. My father wouldn't lend me the money. And that's when I knew I had to get smart. And that's when I did.
It's so interesting to me because I'm sure that was traumatic for you. And I think that a lot of people have trauma around money. And it's not really talked about very much. So I know for myself, when I was in college, so not as an extreme of a story as you, but when I was in college, I would wake up at night thinking, how am I going to pay my rent? I am making just above minimum wage and I can only work 15 hours a week. How is this going to even add up? I could do the math and it wasn't adding up. And I got books that are coming, and how little can I spend on food? And it was just extremely stressful. And one of the things that I decided to do then was become an accounting major, get an accounting degree, because I could. And that actually did help that immediate problem. But then ultimately, it created some other problems for me too. Like, I didn't really love that kind of work. It was okay, but not any kind of fulfilling thing. So for me, I became a financial planner, partly because it's got a lot of juice. It's a lot more interesting. You can work with both parts of your brain, and it's very integrative. And so there's just, and it's so interesting that people's different relationships with money. So can you give me any examples about how people can change, like how people have changed their attitude about money?
It involves the outer work of wealth, which is the practical. And that's where most of the industry stays, looks at, focuses on the outer work. But if you have trouble with the outer work, telling the difference between a stock and a bond or figuring out how to negotiate, then it's important to address the inner work or the emotional, psychological. And even if especially for women, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I play tennis. And so in tennis, there's this whole like outer game and inner game. Because you can see tennis players or other athletes who like choke. And that's all about the inner game. And so it's so interesting to me that that's the same thing that you're saying, is that there's the outer stuff, but then there's the inner game. It's like how you think
it's with everything in life, every sport, every activity, everything in life. There's an outer game, there's an inner game, there's two more games. The third is what I call the higher work of wealth. And this is the spiritual. And I believe that we are all on this planet for a purpose, but we cannot possibly fulfill our purpose and play full out if we're struggling financially, if we're drowning in debt. So that is an important part, is why am I here? And how could my money become a tool for helping me achieve my purpose? And the fourth prong is what I call the deeper work of wealth. And that's the mind-brain connection. Changing the brain is a big part of it. The inner work, just changing our thoughts, is not enough. It's understanding how the mind and the brain work together.
That's interesting, because there's in my industry, there's like known kind of bugs. Like our brains are not developed for the type of financial outer work that is out there these days. And there's known things like people sell when stocks are at the bottom and they buy when they're at the height, and that's just part of that connection. You have to be conscious of it. Tell me more.
Well, what happens is when you go into fear, like the fear is the worst tool to use, the worst thing to use to buy or sell stocks, or buy and sell anything. But because when we go into fear, this is so primitive. This is how we stayed alive, our primitive ancestors. When we go into fear, our thinking brain shuts down. It just goes offline. And our limbic system, our primitive brain, takes over, and it goes into fight, flight, or freeze immediately. And we can't help it unless the only thing that I think the best way to stop that process from happening is to make decisions from knowledge and not fear, ignorance, or habit. So it's really education is the really important part of this.
Right, and it's bringing the knowledge up to I don't even know what part of your brain it is, but like the prefrontal cortex or what?
Exactly.
Like that's
exactly.
where you need to be making your decisions on this.
Yes, but when you go into fear, it shuts down. That is our survival mode. It shuts down, goes immediately to the primitive brain that immediately takes us into fight, flight, or freeze so we can protect ourselves.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting because in one of your books, you talk about feeling at one point in your life like confused and able to focus on money. And I'm wondering how that.
One point, it was my whole life until I turned 45. My whole life.
So tell me more about it. Like, how does that work with your brain? Like, what was going on there?
What was going on there? I was terrified.
Mm-hmm.
I believed what my father told me, that men, only men can manage money, not women. That's not my job. I don't have the skill set for it. I believed that. So what happened is when I saw my husband was gambling, my belief, our brain is called confirmation bias. Our brain will not let us do anything, see anything, hear anything that does not confirm our beliefs. And so I saw my husband was gambling. I didn't believe I could do it. So I went into avoidance. I went into flight, as they say.
It's really interesting because I just see that with people that I talk to sometimes. It's just this confusion factor. And I love how you've explained it. Like, okay, I'm in fear mode, and then I just get this muddle brain. And it's just fascinating to me. So you've interviewed, you know what? First, we're going to take a break, and then I'm going to come back with Barbara Huson, and we're going to talk more about her thoughts about how to get everything you want with money.
Do you want to know what makes Chicago great at 8? Well, it's having your say, of course. For more than 15 years, Having Your Say has brought you behind-the-scenes coverage of Chicago's movers and shakers. So make sure you tune in to CAN TV 19 this week and every week for Having Your Say and more exciting Chicago programs.
Hi, I'm Bridget Sullivan-Mermel with the Chicago Money Show. We're back with Barbara Huson talking about how to get everything that you want with money. What's the biggest surprise that you've had when you're interviewing six-figure women?
So for my book, Secrets of Six-Figure Women, which was the second book I wrote, so these were women who made 6 and 7 figures. I had lots of surprises, but can I say my 2 biggest surprises?
Go for it.
The first one, they were so confident. I expected these women to be very, very confident. But as we get deeper and deeper into the interviews, I saw every single one struggled with the fear. They were struggled with self-doubt. 99% felt like a fraud and were afraid others were going to find out. And I was thinking, I wrote this book because I was a chronic under-earner and I wanted to make 6 figures. Mm-hmm. And it's like when I heard that they were all scared, they all had self-doubt, I thought, oh my God, that's just like me. But the difference between them and me is they didn't let the fear, they didn't let the self-doubt, they didn't let the feeling like a fraud stop them. They did it anyway. And I'm telling you that one thing is what took me from being an under-earner, never making more if I even made $50,000 a year, to making over $100,000 before I even finished writing the book. It was amazing. The second thing, surprise.
Go ahead.
The second surprise is these women making 6 and 7 figures, how few of them were wealthy. They were so busy making money that they didn't have the time, the interest, the skills to manage it. I remember interviewing a woman who worked in Hollywood. She was an executive for one of the big film studios. She made over $700,000 a year. This was in the year 2000. She made over $700,000 a year. And I remember her saying to me, Barbara, I feel one step away from a refrigerator carton on the street. I said, how's that possible? She said, my biggest investment were shoes in Neiman Marcus. It's like she just had this feeling like this amorphous something was going to come and save her.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
So the thing that I saw is what I call the illusion of affluence. That just because these women and so many people make a lot of money doesn't mean they will keep it. That wealth doesn't come from what you earn. It comes from what you do with what you earn.
Yeah, and it's also about how you feel. So I have plenty of people who are clients and not clients who feel like they have enough. They're good. And I will tell them, I will confirm that. Like if they're clients, yeah, you got enough. You're doing good. You're spending the right amount. And they feel happy and wealthy and like they're good. And then there's other people. The next person that might come into my office is a high earner, and they might be exactly like this executive you described, like all stressed out about it and feel like they don't have enough. And so it seems like one of the keys that you talk about is that what's real wealth? Why don't you tell me more about that?
So I believe wealth is not an amount. It's an attitude. Mm-hmm. It's a mindset. I define wealth. Wealth is when you have more than enough and you know it. Because here's the thing, I know, and I'm sure you do, know women that have millions and they feel financially insecure. I know people who have less and they feel bountiful. It's really an attitude. It's how you look at it.
Right.
And so the word wealth comes from the root word weal, W-E-A-L, which means peace of mind. And that is really what the point of wealth is. It's not just to amass money, it is also to have peace of mind.
Right. And that's really what people are looking for. Let's talk about under-earning, okay? You've helped probably millions with getting from, like, overcoming under-earning is a beautiful title. So tell me more about, let's just say one requirement for upping your earnings.
First, let me define an under-earner, okay?
Perfect.
An under-earner is anyone who needs or desires more money, but despite her efforts, can't get there. So you can make six figures and still be an under-earner. And you can make less and not be. Two of my daughters, one is a farmer and one owns a small town movie theater. Neither of them make a lot of money, but they're doing what they love because it feeds their soul. And here's the thing, they make enough to meet their needs. Mm-hmm. Under-earners, it's never a conscious choice. It never feeds their soul. It's always a condition of deprivation, and not just of money, but of time, of joy, of choices, and most of all, of self-esteem.
You know, it's just so interesting that you bring this up. So what would you say? Like, so you're talking to someone, you can see they're clearly an under-earner, and they might make a lot or they might not. And to be honest, I see this with men as well. I think that there's plenty of guys that suffer from the same difficulties, but the 20% alpha guys who act like alpha males, either half of them know what they're doing and half of them don't, and they're just wannabes. But anyway, that group kind of gives the rest of the guys a bad name. But when I'm actually working with guys, they have a lot of these same issues. So
in fact,
go ahead.
My book Overcoming Under-Earning is the only one of my 7 books that I actually interviewed men and worked with men in this subject. You're right, a lot of men. But more women are under-earners than men.
Absolutely. Because again, your point, first we have a socialization that was more prevalent in previous generation, but I think is still there. It's not like that's totally gone away. And then just there's a lot of socialization and many reasons like you've mentioned before. Okay, so if you want to rewire your brain for financial success, what are your suggestions?
Okay, there's 3 steps to rewiring your brain. Because remember, your brain controls your behavior. Mm-hmm. This is really key. Trying to change your behavior without rewiring your brain makes this change a real struggle. So when you can rewire your brain and you want to shift your behavior around money, you rewire your brain, and it sounds very simple, but it takes massive effort, massive determination at the beginning. So let me give you 3 steps. I'll say them quickly. And if you want to hear more, I'll be glad to tell you. 3 steps. The first step is recognize. Second is reframe. And the third is respond differently. Recognize, up to a little bit more. Recognize any kind of negative or unhealthy thoughts you may be having about what you want to change. Recognize the thoughts, reframe. Oh, look at that thought. Isn't that interesting? Look at it with curiosity, not judgment or criticism. Isn't that interesting? There must be a way to see this differently. And you change the thought to the opposite, which of course you won't believe, but you keep repeating it like a mantra. Oh, there's more than enough. There's plenty. I can do this. I absolutely can. So first, recognize the unhealthy thought. Second, reframe it. And third, respond differently as if the reframe was true. Responding differently means not doing what you're used to doing, what feels normal doing, what feels comfortable doing something different, which your brain is going to scream and yell, don't do that, it's dangerous, and you do it anyway. You keep doing these these 3 steps over and over again, and in just a few weeks, if you do it vigilantly, you will notice the difference, I promise.
It's just so interesting. Okay, so I want to go next to, we've talked about the brain, okay? But you also talk about the mind as separate from the brain. So let's talk about how the mind and the brain are both important to understand when you're working with money.
First, there's a tremendous amount of controversy among neuroscientists. It's what the brain is. The brain is obvious. It's an organ in your head, right? With billions and billions of cells. But the mind, that's where the controversy is. I follow the neuroscientists who believe that the mind and the brain are separate, that the brain is this organ in your head, but the mind is a non-physical entity, the source of thoughts and feelings. And it is the thoughts and feelings that come from your mind that sculpt, shape your brain. So if you want to shape your brain, you do it by changing your thoughts and shifting your feelings.
So if I was going to use an electricity analogy, I've just been reading about Ben Franklin. So if I was going to use an electricity analogy, it's almost like the brain is the wiring and then the mind is the electricity, the actual electricity coming through. But you can manipulate your brain based on how you use this electricity.
Well, I think a better analogy is the brain is the computer.
Okay.
It's the hardware, and the thoughts and your feelings, the mind, are the software that you program it with. So whatever thoughts go in is how it gets programmed. The more those thoughts go in, the deeper, stronger the program.
The bigger the groove, right. Okay, so what's our main takeaway? What do you want our audience to realize the most?
I think the biggest risk you take with your money is to do nothing at all. The best thing you can do is spend time, if you're not, is spend time getting educated. The second biggest thing is get help. Get help. I'm a big believer in working with financial professionals. The women I interviewed didn't necessarily make the most money, but the ones that had the highest net worth were the ones that worked with, at least at some point, with a team of professionals.
So if people want to find out more about you, how would you suggest that they do that?
I think the best way is through my website, Barbara at Barbara-Huson, HUSON.com. And if they're interested in my books, except for my last one, are all under my maiden name of Barbara Stanny.
Okay.
So
either Barbara Stanny or Barbara Huson, and then you find out more information, which I highly recommend. Okay, so my name is Bridget Sullivan Ramel. I own a fee-only financial planning firm, and we love helping people find more money, more meaning, and more happiness with their finances. So you can check out my firm's website at sullivanramel.com if you want more information there. Please check out this show's website at chicagomoneyshow.com. There you can sign up for the newsletter so you can get a heads up before upcoming guests. And if there's a guest you want or a question you'd like answered, please email the show at ask@chicagomoneyshow.com. Thanks for watching.